watch out for the retrievals, right?
Have you ever had the UAPs just come arrest you with a predator?
There's something is started to happen.
Welcome to the Psychic Guys. Today we're joined by Dr. Courtney Brown to discuss remote viewing, the UAP phenomenon, and ET life. Courtney Brown is both a university professor and founder of Farsight. Farsight is a pioneering organization featuring full public projects using remote viewing. Courtney Brown also publishes methods for video recording UAPs or UFOs on demand using specialized procedures and cameras. He has a special interest in the UAP phenomenon and extraterrestrial intelligence, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Welcome, Courtney.
Hey, I'm glad to be here, guys. Thanks.
So there's a lot of talk recently about disclosure, and that idea is entering the mainstream and the political discourse. What do you think is really going on here? And does your work at Farsight align with the claims that are being made? Or do you think we're being misled? Like, what would you say the state of the art is in understanding this from your perspective?
It's a complex question. It's not a simple question. Back in the remote viewing early days, when remote viewing was just coming out, the general thrust within the remote viewing community was to not to talk about UAPs, UFOs, aliens, extraterrestrials, because it was too much of a woo-woo factor and people were too much focused on just getting remote viewing accepted, that it's real, and then that's just bite. I had one military guy say, Courtney, you're dumping the whole kitchen sink at them. Just give them a little piece, a little small piece, and that'll be good enough. But as we kept on doing projects at Farsight, we kept seeing the bigger picture, and there was just no way you could get out of it. So the disclosure thing, if you want to just sort of focus on that right away, that's being pioneered by a lot of people, but right now it's being pioneered by David Grush. And he has a Pentagon clearance right now, and he maintains a Pentagon clearance, and he gets permission to say everything that he's saying from the Pentagon when he does congressional hearings and things like that. And when he wants to say something new, he gets permission to do that. On the other hand, from the Pentagon, you also get people coming out, generals, officers saying, we have no evidence that these UAPs are anything other than American stuff that we're doing, terrestrial stuff. There's no aliens, there's no nothing, just go away. So clearly what's going on is that the Pentagon is split. I don't know what the split is in terms of percentages, but let us say half of the Pentagon seems to be in favor of disclosure, and half of the Pentagon seems to be saying, shut that up at all costs. So the military is not a monolithic thing that just says one thing. However, if you focus on just the disclosure movement within the Pentagon, and then you switch over to what's going on with the not disclosure, there's two things. There's a completely different dynamic going on. So within the side that says disclosure is good, they're clearly trying to put the cart before they're clearly trying to pull the cart forward and say, disclosure is good, but they're not putting the cart before the horse by giving the implications of this. They're not saying the consequences. So when you get someone like David Grush saying disclosure is real, we have non-human biologics, which is a crazy way to talk about people, but non-human biologics, we have crashed ships. They're not saying this. They're not saying why the ships are crashing in the first place, and nobody's asking that. And they're not saying what they're doing with the survivors. So they are saying the ships are crashing, and we are capturing the people that are coming out of them. That is not in dispute anymore. He's got official Pentagon clearance to say that stuff. Even if the other half of the Pentagon says, nope, we don't have any evidence of that whatsoever. It's not David Grush just talking off the top of his head. He's got full clearance to say this stuff. So when you look at the issue of what they're not saying, why are they crashing? It's incredible that everything gets boiled down to the stupidest question that could possibly be asked by all media people, even Congress people. They always end everything with, does this mean we're not alone in the universe? I mean, it's so blankety-blank stupid. Does this mean they're not alone? Nobody's asking the correct questions, which is, well, if these ETs have been around for all this time, what the heck have they been doing? And then the other question that should be asked is, if they're crashing, are you telling me that these civilizations have the capability of flying a ship across a galaxy with new physics that we don't fully understand And once they get here, the motor breaks and they just crash. Are their mechanics like incompetent? Do they need to sign up at Pet Boys to get their stuff fixed, to get the motor repaired or something? What's wrong with them? We got mechanics down here. Why don't they just stop at a gas station? We can fix it. Why crash? So they're not asking why they're crashing, and then they're not asking who are these people that are coming off of it, these non-human biologics. Now, these are official Pentagon-approved statements saying that they're crashed, they're being retrieved, and we're getting beings coming out of them. So that's not a dispute anymore. That means the Pentagon, at least half of it, is officially saying that's correct. But they're not saying why they're crashing and what's happening to those people. So long ago at Farsight, I was really determined to push this to the forever boundaries. People used to argue with me all the time. No, let's keep the ET stuff out of it. But every time we did stuff, we ran into these ETs. Like, for example, Daz and Dick Algar, they did one of the most amazing, pioneering projects that's ever been done by humankind ever. They did a project called the Great Pyramid of Giza. Then people say, oh, but it's esoteric. Where do you get we need verifiables. What the heck? What are you talking about? They're verifiables. The Great Pyramid of Giza has 5 blankety-blank pyramids in the middle of the desert under completely blind conditions, taking sessions totally done solo with no target information whatsoever, just saying there's a target, do this. They described the pyramids, all of them, in the middle of the desert with camels and people running around with loincloths. I mean, what more do you want for verifiable stuff? But in addition, they also picked up how the things are being moved, that they had AT tech that was being used, and that some of the people were, pardon the expression, non-human biologics. They picked up all of this stuff. So you say, okay, well, the stuff you don't like is esoteric. It's because it's dealing with ETs. But the stuff you do like is, the thing is, if they got all of the verifiables perfectly correct, why is the other information not correct? So wherever we went, we ran into these things. And so the real question is, what the heck is going on? And so what we have done at Farsight, we have really pushed the boundaries since the early days. We've just pushed to find out sort of what is actually going on. The latest research, all of our research is done totally blind. People start out basically solo, and they end up doing their stuff in a cinematically very interesting way. Even Daz and Dick, back in the early days, they did their stuff on camera, very interestingly done. It was done on whiteboard, but still, it was great to watch. Multiple cameras, the whole thing, and it's still available. Not only is it available on our streaming service, farsightprime.com, but those sessions with Daz and Dick, they're available on YouTube. Anybody could just go and see them. Same thing with the JFK assassination. So what we have is a situation where over the many years, we've been investigating one project after the next. Now we have over 100 projects, fully fleshed out, all done totally blind to the target, basically explaining everything you could possibly imagine with regard to the extraterrestrial stuff, the UFO stuff, but also a lot of political stuff. We came up, for example, just recently with a big project on RFK Jr., Robert F. Kennedy Jr. There actually is, or was, an assassination plot that was being planned against him. I'm assuming it's shut down now, because when we came out with that project, the whole idea of publishing it was to get the intelligence service, which is very compartmentalized. It's very compartmentalized, meaning something can go on in one room in the Pentagon, and 99% of the rest of the Pentagon simply doesn't know. You see, if you let everybody in the Pentagon know what everybody's doing, you can't contain any secrets. And the Pentagon, the military, must contain secrets. That applies to British intelligence and British military, applies to French military, German military, Russian military, Chinese military. You have to have compartmentalization, meaning as few as people as possible get to know something. So if some group in the Pentagon was involved with some major players out there, and they were sort of denying Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Secret Service protection, thus allowing somebody else, which is what we found out, somebody else in the Middle East to come in and kill him, That's what we found out was going on, that there was a reason why he was being denied Secret Service protection. They were setting it up to allow somebody else. And then the Pentagon could say, that's terrible, that's awful, how could that possibly have happened? And they would be able to deny everything. However, what we would do is we published a project saying, this is what's happening. They've got a situation. They're denying him Secret Service protection for a reason. And this is the group that's actually planning on doing something. So that's strict political stuff. And Daz was involved in some of our political stuff as well. 9/11, the John F. Kennedy assassination, and some other stuff. So it's not just esoteric UFO ET stuff that we do. We have a huge collection of things. We've even done, Pope Francis, a whole project on Pope Francis. We've got a huge thing. We did this. We just recently did one on Lao Tzu, the philosopher, the creator of Taoism. We have a whole body of everything. But with regard to your question, the UFO, UAP situation, we have a situation in which, without dispute now, because one half of the Pentagon is saying it's real, that it is happening, but what they're not saying is the following. We've done projects on this, and we just released another half of another project that we've been working on, which is why the ships are crashing and what's happening to the, the non-human biologics. They're being shot out of the blankety-blank sky. Now, they're being shot out of the sky by the American Secret Space Program. Now, I can prove it to you, but I'm going to have to use logic. Please allow me to use logic for a sense. I'm going to ask all of you to pretend that you're generals in the American military, generals or admirals in the military. Okay, just pretend for a second. Now, the fact that there is a crash retrieval program is not in dispute anymore. The Pentagon has authorized, at least half of the Pentagon has authorized this information to come out. So, Mr. Generals, let me ask you, if you had an extraterrestrial ship in your possession that it crashed for whatever reason, and you went out and picked it up, and you put it in, say, the desert, let me ask you a question. Are you going to order all of your men to gather around in a circle, the UFO ship, and then you put a campfire in the middle of it, and then you have them all sing Kumbaya for, year after year? Is that what you're going to do with it? That would be real. Logic, the first thing any general in his right mind or her right mind is going to do is say, okay, I want a dozen of those. I want them by Friday. They're going to, and even David Grush is saying they're using it to reverse engineer the tech. So the first thing they're going to say, and this has been going on for decades, David Grush officially has stated this has been going on for a long time. Remember, that's Pentagon approved information. Now, just put two and two together. If it's been going on for a long time, then those ships have to exist. Now, the last piece of the proof I want to give you is it is now public record how much money has been lost by the Pentagon. We're talking trillions of dollars over the last few decades. Trillions of dollars, not $1 trillion, not 1 million or 1 billion. Trillions with an S at the end of it. Now, do you mean that with all that funding, the Pentagon did not have enough money to hire an accountant? That's what you're saying. So obviously had to use the money, and they're still using it. They're losing hundreds of billions of dollars every year. So the question you have to say is, what is it being spent on? The most expensive ticket item that you can imagine is the American Secret Space Program. And they're obviously not going to tell people about it because that would open up the entire house of cards. So they're going to use SpaceX rockets in order to get things into orbit. They're going to do other things to make it sort of seem like we don't have this tech. So the American Space Program has to exist. Otherwise, what would all this money be going to? Secondly, the question that you then have to say is, where is it being used for? Okay, this is what we have found out. This is the short story, then I'll shut up and you can ask another question. What we have found out is that once you have the ships, you have to be able to take them apart and figure out how they work. And to use not just to use the tech on the ships, but to make your own versions of the tech. And you've got this extreme compartmentalization. So you've got to have Lockheed Martin, you have to have all the major tech companies involved in this stuff. So what you need is somebody to explain how the damn stuff works. So what we have is a formal alliance, a formal written set of written agreements by the United States government, and apparently the Israeli government and a few other governments, I assume British government as well. But there are formal written agreements between the U.S. government and a group of extraterrestrials who, for better or worse, we like to call the reptilians, that they actually exist. Now, you can say, okay, Courtney, you're going a little far here. You say there's written agreements by the United States government and the extraterrestrials. Okay, how do you know that? Did they come and tell you that? No. That was stated by Chaim Eshed, Haimeshed, on record, in writing, in a Hebrew publication that he thought he was going to get away with. The only thing is they found out that a lot of people know Hebrew, and it was immediately translated to a whole bunch of languages. Chaim Eshed was the director of the Israeli Space Directorate. He was the head of the Israeli Space Directorate. Now listen, for 30 years. Also, he's a decorated general, and he's currently a professor. And he said on record in a Hebrew publication that there are written agreements that are signed by the United States government and extraterrestrials in exchange for tech help. So that's really not in dispute, and he's never taken it away. He sort of regretted that he made the interview, that he did it on record, and he sort of was surprised that the Hebrew got translated into a billion languages immediately, but nonetheless, it's on record. So these written agreements actually exist, and what they're doing is what they're taking, and he's actually talked about there being multiple different species doing that. He actually also said there was a base on Mars, and actually Daz participated in a project that we originally tried to get published in a major scientific journal, the Journal of Scientific Exploration, and it was accepted, fully accepted. And Daryl Bem, who's a big guy in the sci community, he was the associate editor and went through a year-long peer review process. 10 days before it was published. There's a bit of a backstory before, but 10 days before it got published, it got sort of what I call mysteriously pulled. This is 10 days. The proofs, everything were in. Everything was done. It was ready to be published in 10 days. Suddenly, it got pulled immediately. We have to send it out for peer review. Again. And I said, what? And then they sent it to, of all people, John Alexander, who's my nemesis. He's been hostile to me since the beginning, and everybody knew he was if you want to kill anything that Courtney's doing, send it to John Alexander. He was not even close to being a unbiased review. And I can only say that because he was so gloating about how he killed the article, is he published a damn book called Reality Denied, and on page 125, I think it is, or 129, he gloated about how he killed, how he's opposed me from the very beginning, and the former Colonel John Alexander, and how he killed that article. And so you can sort of say, well, what the blankety blank? You're supposed to send it to. First of all, it had already gone through a year review, had a great associate, had a great editor. It was going back and forth through revision after revision. Now you can sort of say, well, that's pretty cool, but nonetheless, you can see that there's resistance. People are trying to kill things behind the scenes. The article, however, you can still see. So Dez's work and a zillion other people's work it can be found actually if you go to our website, farsight.org, you can actually see the article. Actually, do you mind me screen sharing for a second?
Oh, yeah, sure. Go ahead.
All right. I'll screen share. I'll go here. This is my normal website. Actually, not my normal website, the Farsight Institute's normal website. Do you see it now, Farsight?
Yeah, we got it.
Okay, let me go down to the bottom. This is farsight.org. And what you'll see at the bottom is some links. It says, physical and remote viewing evidence of active artificiality on Mars. Okay, all right, that's pretty good. That's the actual article that was pulled 10 days before it was supposed to be. That's the actual article that Daz participated in, as well as many others. Since then, we've done a lot of other research on that base. Now, and this is we've done a number of projects. You should be able to see now. Hopefully you can see now. Do you see a picture of the nozzle Okay, at this point, you should be able to see a picture of the nozzle.
Yeah, we can see that.
All right. Well, look, folks, this was the target that Daz described, as well as Dick Algar, as well as a whole bunch of other people. There's a nozzle there. Do you see it? And it has stuff coming out of it, waste liquid. I don't think that's very fuzzy. I think that's as clear as day. And then it has a pipeline going to it, and it goes into a dome. There's actually 3 domes in that area. Okay, so then you can say, well, and I'm saying that we have done tons of research. That is a base. And there is a base where there's both humans and ETs working side by side. Then you can say, oh, okay, well, Courtney, it does look like there's a spray there, but how do you know there's humans and ETs working side by side? Again, that's Haim Eshed, the former head of the Israeli Space Directorate. He said that there's a base on Mars where humans and ETs work side by side. And then you can say, well, what about this picture? Where did you get it? Did you Photoshop this thing? And I said, no, this is supplied by NASA, JPL, Malin Space Science Systems. It's not me. They gave me the photo. And so you really have to say, well, this is sort of unusual. Yes, it is unusual, but this is the type of thing. We don't do targets where there's nothing verifiable. So this is sort of where we're going at. Now, I'm hopefully back now. All right, so the issue is that Haim Eshed, former head of the Israeli Space Directorate, has said that this base exists, that such a base exactly exists. Now, John Alexander, for example, the guy who killed the article, he has said, oh, are you serious? And he argued this with the journal. He probably just said, he probably said crazy stuff to the journal people. But anyway, he boasted about how he killed it. So it's not like secret. So, and then in writing, in his book. And so the issue is then, how do you actually supply this? And one of his arguments was, how can there be a base on Mars with humans on it? We can't fly there. How can we supply such a base? Well, of course we can't fly there. You're not going to go there with SpaceX rockets. You have to have an American secret space program. So together with everything else, you have to have ships that use ET tech that can get to that place. So we have actually done 3 major projects just on that base. And in fact, that's exactly what you get. You have UFOs that are, reverse engineered craft that actually land on our Earth here, right here in bases, and that they supply that base. But guys, don't complain to me about me doing esoteric stuff. That picture was not esoteric. That was a NASA picture, and it had stuff in it that you can see clear as day. So when you look at the pyramids, don't tell me you're complaining because it's esoteric stuff. The pyramids, you can see it. Take a flight, go to Egypt, go on a tour, look at the pyramids, and then look at Daz's original work under totally blind condition, and tell me that this is easy. No, it's not easy. Daz will corroborate this, I think. He used to be ticked off, pissed as hell, and Dick Algar the same thing, because I'd say, we need another session. That's all I tell him. And he'd go, it was like 9 sessions going over like 3 months. They were ready to like throw me a Molotov cocktail and burn me up. I mean, it was like they were so upset. But when it was all done, it was to die for. It was, to live for. It was golden. And you couldn't replicate it. Nobody has done a similar project since. So, okay, they got angry with me in the beginning because it was so much work. But like, was it worth it? Guys, was it worth it? It happened, okay, so over a 3-4 month period, they did a ton of work. I'm talking like 9 sessions over and over and over, but they got everything. Was it worth it? And no one has ever done such a project before. Yes, now you can clearly say it was worth it. It's on the historical record, and Daz was the guy who did it. Dick Algar, he was the guy who did it. And it was totally blind. They weren't told anything at all. They worked solo. And they described, so it demonstrated how the remote viewing can be used for operational stuff, for real stuff. And it also showed how there is extraterrestrial involvement in these stuff. And Daz came up with an amazing piece of information in those sessions. If you look at it, he explained how the actual blocks of stone were being moved. Now, those are 80-ton blocks, and they were cut so perfect, you cannot, and fit together so perfect, and moved from a quarry that was quite a way, many kilometers away. You can't even put a human hair between those blocks. in the pyramid. That's to the accuracy. And he described how they were done. They weren't putting up a bunch of slaves and then having them on their shoulders or putting them on a camel or anything. He said they were using some wand type thing that used sound, and sound was lifting it, and it was ET tech that was being, and you can move it that way. And people at the time were saying, hey, that's crazy. Now you can actually get YouTube videos of people showing how sound is used with the vibration to actually lift big objects and move them about. You can actually see that tech actually coming about. But back in the day when Des and Dick did those sessions, that tech wasn't available, and there were no videos that you could see of this stuff. But now that tech is available. And so you can say, well, all right, this is interesting stuff. But the people who complained about the esoteric content are basically saying, we want you to corrupt your data. Only show us the stuff that we can see. Don't show us anything we can't see. And we're not going to do that. We believed in taking the data for whatever it is and publishing it and let people decide for themselves. And that has turned out to be the best policy, because over time, you get to look at it and you say, well, I'm glad it was done, because on the historical record, can you imagine where the remote viewing field would be right now if Daz Smith and his work we did with Dick Gower, if it never existed? If they never did the JFK thing, if they never did the Great Pyramid of Giza thing, if they never did all the other great projects they did, such as the origin of that big spot on Iapetus, if they never did all of those projects, where would we be right now? Do you see a whole bunch of public projects coming out anywhere else in the remote viewing community? Do you see like thousands of projects coming out? So those projects that Dick and Jazz did are historical markers of what can be done. And it's essential that people understand that these were great achievements done at an early age, in an early time, showing what's possible with remote viewing. Now, the other thing, and I'll shut up after this, the other thing is that's not being told is what's happening to the human biologics. So what we've got, this is the short story. This is 3 sentences and I'm done. We've got the extraterrestrials that we call the bad guys, the ones who agreed to give the tech in exchange for explaining how the tech works to the American secret space program. They're giving the tech, and then the Americans are going out and shooting down UFOs. That means there are 2 basic categories of ETs. They're good guys and they're the bad guys. Now, don't think in racist terms. The different species are on both sides. They both have reptilians. They have the reptilians are almost entirely on the bad guys, but they have insectoids on both sides. They have grays on both sides. They have lots and lots of people that look just like you and I on both sides. So what is actually going on is that the reptilians are using the American secret space program as a mercenary lapdog force, as a lapdog mercenary force to shoot down the ETs that are being flown by the good guys. Now, right now, there's a Cold War between the bad ETs and the good ETs. There's a Cold War, and neither side wants it to burst out into a hot war. So if the reptilians and their allies shoot down the ET ships of the good guys, it'll immediately turn into a hot war. However, if you give the tech to the American secret space program and say, good doggy, go out and shoot down those ships, the good guys are not going to fire back, because they're here to try to help humanity, to release this humanity from this essentially a prison that we're in here that's being essentially run by the bad guys. So they can't fire back. Otherwise, the Americans would say, oh my gosh, the aggressors, and they would throw them further into the hands of the bad ETs, the reptilians. So it would be self-defeating. So what happens is the good ETs, which have way more than enough capability to completely eliminate the American secret space program, and when they're attacked, they could easily blow all those ships out of the sky. They're not doing that. They're letting themselves be hit, they're letting themselves crash, and they're letting themselves be captured. Those are the non-human biologics. And then the American secret space program grabs them, debriefs them for a little bit, like an hour or 2, and then hands them over to the bad ETs, where they are thoroughly, absolutely, and totally tortured. They hook them up, they cut them, they cut flesh out of them, they do everything. You can't imagine the level of torture. And the good ETs are letting it happen to them. They're not fighting back because they're here to try to help humanity, and they realize if they fought back, it would defeat the whole purpose. That's what's going on. The U.S. military space program, a lapdog mercenary force, essentially being run by the bad guys. And they're taking advantage of the fact that the good ETs won't fight back. That's where all of these crash ships are coming from. They don't have bad mechanics. They have good technology. They've got good repair people. They're being shot down by tech that the reptilians and the other bad ETs are giving them. And again, most of what I just said is not in dispute. Chaim Eshed, former head of the Israeli Space Directorate, he has said point blank on record that these contracts are in place and that type of tech transfer is being done. He didn't say what it's being used for, but the fact that the secret space program is getting this tech is not in dispute if you look at people who know anything. And I promised you I'd shut up. I do talk a lot, but I'll shut up now.
So, Courtney, forgive me if this is a bit of a ignorant question.
Go ahead.
But you've been talking about good ETs versus bad ETs. How are we sure that these ones that you're describing as the good ETs are actually good ETs? Like, what if this is a situation where it's like the bad ETs versus the worse ETs?
Yeah, it's a good question. And people ask that. We have done a zillion projects, actually, it's about 100 projects, on the various aspects of all of this. And what we have found is the group that we call the bad guys, the bad ETs, they do really, really bad things. They're involved with the entire human abduction program. Now, again, I like to say it's not just me. The human abduction program, that was written extensively by a fellow academic, David M. Jacobs, former professor at Temple University. It was also written by John Mack, former professor. He's dead now, but he's a late professor at Harvard. We are the only three professors that actually have risked our careers, actually a very substantial risk, and paid many penalties as a result of it, to talk about this stuff. But the huge human abduction program is essentially part of both genetic stuff, but also human trafficking. There are three major money movers on the planet Earth. Everything else is less than this. The biggest money mover of everything is human trafficking. After that, it's drug sales. And after that, it's weapons sales. Those are the three biggest money movers on the planet Earth. And among the human trafficking stuff, which is the biggest, there is no bigger element to human trafficking than what's being done by the bad ETs. So we have done a zillion projects on stuff that they're doing. Now, back in the old days when they had the pyramids being built, the project that Daz and Dick worked on, that was when the bad ETs had complete unbridled control over the prison planet that they were having here. That was what they would normally have done and kept doing. And that was not the reptilians sort of dominating everything. That was another group that we call Orions, but nonetheless, they're not dominant right now anymore. They're actually controlled by the reptilians now. But back in those days, they were the ones who were running the planet. That was really a bad time, and that was how we would all be using rock to this day if that continued. There were some military altercations, actually, in Daz and Dick's, their own projects in the Great Pyramid of Giza. At the end of the project, that's what even they said. We've gone into this a lot since then. But in that project that was published decades ago, they said at the very end, there was a military confrontation. And the bad guys were chased away. I mean, it's on record, and you can look at it on YouTube, the Great Pyramid of Giza. And then we investigated, but there was a military altercation. Some of the good ETs came in, and they blasted the heck out of what was going on. And then the bad ETs had to go into, basically, they had to work from behind the scenes. And now they are still working from behind the scenes. But it weakened what they were doing, and slowly humanity started to bounce back. Now we have technology, good technology. We're using it right now on this podcast They have cars. We have buildings that go into the sky that are usable, not useless pyramids. Pyramids that are big blocks of rock that you can't use. They offer no shelter, no good purpose. Those are useless, but they're great for keeping people mesmerized into a religion and controlling people. But now we have like regular buildings, skyscrapers and stuff like that. So we've evolved a lot because the old prison stuff was weakened, but it's not gone. Now the bad ETs have repurposed things. Okay, well, if we can't keep them in slaves like in the old pyramid days, we might as well use them. So here we have the American Secret Space Program. And then we also have situations where we've been watching them in project after project after project. And like, what kind of projects? So let me share the screen one more time and bring you back to the Secret Space Program thing. I mean, not Secret Space Program thing, but to the American Secret, to the Farsight's website here. So you should be seeing that. Let me check to make sure you're seeing it.
we got it.
You are seeing it. Okay. Just scroll down here and look at all the projects we have. UFO crashes. We have multiple stuff. By the way, Daz, you'd be interested on this. We just published Yeme Janae, used to be called Princess Janae, her part in the crashes and also the what happens to the people after they get crashed. We just published that yesterday. And it was one of the most emotionally powerful sessions. There's 2 sessions in it. The second half was like what happens to the people. That was one of the most emotionally powerful recordings done totally blind, totally solo on camera that's ever been. You'd be very interested to watch that. And you have a subscription to Farsight Prime. So if you get a chance to watch Yeme Janae's second session on those UFO crashes, what happens to the human biologics, I've never seen everybody I've talked to, they end up crying when they actually see her. She portrays it so graphically. She like bonds with the people that are having their flesh cut off of them and stuff, and like you have to see it to believe it. Anyway, but here's we have the top side have various UFO type stuff. And we have a lot of projects dealing with ships that we have actually video recorded ourselves. We have leadership stuff, and leadership stuff includes things like whole thing on Elon Musk and Nikola Tesla, the origin of the coronavirus thing. But we also have like also what happens after the 2024 election in the United States, Vladimir Putin. So there's a lot of just brain political stuff, a lot of archaeology, Noah's Ark, Pumapunku, Göbekli Tepe, Eye of the Sahara, Nazca Line, Sodom and Gomorrah. We found ETs in a whole bunch of these things. Pope Francis, Jesus and the Crucifixion. Now, Daz actually participated in a project just with himself on Jesus and the Crucifixion. We since then have sent all of our remote viewers to it and did a whole new project, and they corroborated everything that Daz found out in the first place, which is the Jesus and the Crucifixion thing was not what it was set up to be. That's another whole story. Ra, Zeus. Yeah, let me talk about Zeus for a second. How do you know? This answers your question. How do we know whether you're bad guys? Well, we did a whole thing just on Zeus, and they zoomed right into Zeus. It was a great set of sessions. Zeus was not a god. He was a prison warden. He was being run as a prison. He was one of the bad ETs that we now call, comes out of the Orion sector. He was a serial rapist. That's all he was. He was a prison warden who thought of this place as his harem, and he went around with his crew, took him around with ships, and he used to rape underage girls in front of their parents. If there's anybody that should have been in prison, it's Zeus. I mean, we did stuff like that. Now, how do I know they're the bad guys? You should see the sessions where people are describing under totally blind conditions. They didn't know what the target was. Zeus raping these girls. I'm sorry, he's a bad guy. That's how we know they're bad. We did a whole bunch of stuff on the various forms of the Greys. We did a whole bunch of stuff on the reptilian origin and the Milky Way, how they actually got here. It goes on and on. We have a thing on the an actual reptilian bird of prey, we like to call it, because that's what it looks like. It looks like a Klingon bird of prey. And the video recording of it came out of the ISS, the International Space Station. And then we did one on Cydonia, Mars. The War in Heaven, the annihilation of the dinosaurs. Operation High Jump, that was her admiral bird at the end of World War II, was sent into Antarctica. At the end of World War II, the American forces found out there was one last Nazi base. After they conquered all of Europe, the American forces found out there was one last Nazi base. It was in Europe. So they sent Admiral Byrd there with an aircraft carrier and 13 ships, a whole bunch of aircraft, over 5,000 men, the whole works. They got their ass whipped. And they were thinking that they got beaten up, and this is not in dispute. They had to retreat. They had a lot of ships crash, and actually Admiral Byrd actually made some statements in Chile talking about the next major war is going to come out of Antarctica. What actually happened is the American forces actually thought that they were Nazis flying those UFOs that were coming out of Antarctica and blasting the heck out of the American forces. They completely crushed the entire flotilla. Now, the Americans said, "Oh, we just sent those people there to scout around to see if there was some good place we can set up maybe a landing, an aircraft that we can put a runway." I'm sorry, you don't send an aircraft carrier, 13 ships armed to their teeth, 5,500 men plus a zillion aircraft just to look for a place to put a runway. So, and they got their ass whipped. And so what happened is after that, the ships came out of Antarctica and they buzzed the White House. So the Americans were terrified that the Nazis had this one last base, and that in a matter of half an hour, they could knock out the entire American Air Force, the entire American military. So that's what caused the Americans to sign those damn agreements with the reptilians. That's what caused the thing to happen in the first place. And we had to document that. That's where it was Operation High Jump. The Americans thought they had no choice because anyway, so that's how the whole tech agreement and the legal agreements, that's how that all started. And it goes on and on. We did one on Tunguska, and that one on Tunguska was fabulous. Daz Smith got really interesting stuff. That's the project that caused Dick Algar to want to go off and leave Farsight doing stuff, because he was convinced that it couldn't have been a ship that blew up. He was convinced it was just a meteor that crashed. And anyway, he got all upset by it. But that was a long story, and I won't make the short story out of it. But, that was an interesting project. Nonetheless, Daz got the stuff, I think, totally correct on that. Anyway, and then it goes on and on. We did something called the death traps, which is fascinating. I'll stop with this, but let me just mention something about the death traps. The death traps are tech. Now, when you die, you've heard this 1,000 times, 1 billion times you've heard it. You see the light, and you're drawn to the light. It pulls you in, and it feels warm and good. Guys, that's tech. It's tech. It's technology. It has nothing to do with God. It's tech. What happens is it pulls you in, and as you get closer to the light, you get zapped with a bolt of electricity that's way higher voltage than lightning. And what it does, it's impossible to kill what we call an ISB. We do not call souls, spirits, using vocabulary like that, because there's all types of religious garbage that goes along with it. What we use is a word called ISB, someone who is for the purpose of being, no other reason. And what we have found out is it is impossible to kill an ISB. You are all ISBs. I am an ISB. We are all ISBs. There's nothing but ISBs. And we temporarily house these bodies. We have found that there is nothing that can be animated in the universe without an ISB inside of it. So the thing is that you cannot kill an ISB. That is why Daz has been able to use his ISB side to remote view across time and space. His physical body couldn't do any of that stuff, but his ISB side, it does. It's already across time and space. And so the point is that once you get hit by that bolt of light, that bolt of electricity, you lose your memory. You lose your ability to do remote viewing. You lose your total capability to do telepathy. And that is the normal way ETs communicate. Again, the disclosure stuff, if you go into the disclosure stuff that's coming out of David Grush and anywhere else, everybody says the same thing. The ETs all talk telepathically. They don't use English words. They don't use words. They don't verbalize stuff. They do that among themselves if they want, but their main means of communication is telepathic, and it's normal for them. What you should be asking is, well, if that's true, why can't humans do that? because of this processing that goes on. You get sucked in, you get drawn to the light, boom, you get hit with a bolt, you lose that capability, and then an AI comes out afterwards. It's all computerized. An AI comes out and says, we've talked about your case. Very interesting. You're very interesting. But remember, we talked about it with the Council of Elders. You see the Council of Elders over there? Yeah. Well, we talked about it with the Council of Elders, and we think, well, you remember the arguments you used to have with your mother? Oh, and remember how you had those disagreements with your son and your daughter? Well, we think there's a couple wrinkles in your personality that we think you should work on. But it's up to you. It's free choice. You can decide for yourself. But it really seems that there's a few things you need to work on. You should go back and sort of work on those things. Now, if you have no memory and your perceptual capabilities are shot, there's obvious. You're going to say, sounds good to me. And you go back in. And that's where this whole reincarnation stuff is. It's not something that comes out of the heavens by God or anything. It's just because of tech. You get recycled back in here without your memory, without your ability to do remote viewing, without your ability to do telepathy, and you get here, and then you're into debates about whether the soul actually exists. I'll give you another thing. The ETs that are up there, the good and the bad ones, they look at this entire planet. And I'm not using this as sort of a metaphor, they literally look at this entire planet as a planet of zombies. Literally zombies. People who are dead, yet undead. And they run around. They don't have any memory of who they are, where they came from. They don't have any ability to communicate like normal people out there. And then they run around and hurt everybody. That's what. And when the ETs, the good ETs, get shot down by the bad ETs, they're scared. They're terrified. They're being shot down by a bunch of zombies, being armed by the reptilians, and they're crashing onto a planet of zombies, and they know they can't fight back because they're trying to help the zombies become unzombied. Anyway, Joshua, that's a long answer to your question of how do you know they're bad. We've been doing so many studies of this. It's very clear who the bad guys are and who the good guys are. I really encourage you to look at the most recent projects we just did, which is on farsightprime.com. That's our streaming service. It's technically equivalent to Hulu, Netflix, Disney, Paramount Plus. It's totally on the equivalent. And you get a free week. So you can just sign up for a week. And if you don't like it, just cancel before the week's out. So the point is, if you go there and look at the most recent projects on the UFO crashes that we've done, you can see what happens to them. You can see them being shot down. You can see them being ambushed by the American Secret Space Program. You can see that all of the remote viewers, we only have 2 of them up so far. We have 2 results for 2 remote. The sessions are long. So the 2 hours was Aziz's, my son's sessions, and the Yeme Genève's was an hour and a half. And then the other 2 sessions are coming out in April. But just take a look at what's happening to these people. And they have full technological capabilities to defend themselves, and they're not. That's how you know they're good. They're heroic. Go ahead.
What are they actually doing here that they're being shot down in the process of doing?
Okay,
do you think?
This planet is going way back to the beginning. We have finally figured out, it took a long time, this planet is literally run as a prison. What's the most valuable resource on the whole galaxy is ISBs. The reptilians are a fascist, authoritarian, totalitarian group. And like all of them, think of the Nazis in World War II. What do groups like that want to do? They want to expand. They cannot expand without ISBs, without people to populate all that stuff. They need a mercenary force. They need fighters. They need traders. They need prostitutes to service all of those people, the fighters and everything. They need child traffickers. They need everything. The traders, they need everything you can possibly imagine. And they have to do that in order to expand. What happened in the galaxy, we have figured out of these 100 projects we've done, is that there was a Holocaust of unimaginable proportions, a big war that took place in this galaxy. It was huge. It's basically over now. It was run between a sector of the galaxy we might call the free will side, and then there was the other side was basically dominated by a group that we call the Orions, and they were like, think of it like the Allies during World War II versus the Axis powers, the Nazis and things like that during World War II. So that was like awful, but it's basically shut down. It's basically died down. The old evil empire, that's what Star Wars came out of. That's a whole nother story. We did a whole thing on the origin of Star Wars. We went into the head of George Lucas and followed him back in time before he was George Lucas. He was actually a participant in all of this. He thought he was just designing all this stuff and coming up with, he was remembering what was going on. Anyway, so what basically happened is that there was this Holocaust. That war has stopped. It's over. And we have actually remote viewed the current Orion place and their leader. It's a lot calmer now. It's not so bad. But this was a prison that was set up. And when Daz remote viewed Earth under the prison situation during the Great Pyramid of Giza, that was totally run by the Orion people. Now, but even then, the war had already cut down. But this is a leftover prison, meaning the galaxy is so huge that everybody doesn't just say, oh, I guess the war is over. We can just go home now. And everything is so fragmented and compartmentalized, some things continue on. And so this continued on as a prison. And so what basically happens is that this became a resource, and the reptilians eventually said, hey, this is too good to give up. We're going to come in here. The Orion sector and their empire, they're calming down and so on, but what the heck, we're going to keep going. Though the reptilians have actually fought huge battles on the galaxy, and they don't want to give up. They want to continue to expand, just like Nazis wanted to continue to expand. And they need people to do that. And what you have is you have 8 billion physical human beings on this planet. Plus, imagine how many billions are in the wings. Remember the things that we call the death traps? So not everybody who's physical is everybody. There's all the people in the wings waiting to come back in. So let's say you have 8 billion on the planet and maybe 30 billion in the wings. That's a whole bunch of ISBs. And with those ISBs, you can expand out. And that's what's going on. The reptilians are trying to keep this as a huge population source. This is exactly the same as what happened during the former Soviet Union days, when people couldn't get out of the Soviet Union, or former China during Mao Zedong's time, when they couldn't get out of China. That's what authoritarian fascist forces do. They stop people from leaving. You can't have a prison unless you stop people from leaving. But this is not a prison with bars like human prison. This is a psychological prison. That's why the disclosure thing is such a big issue. That's why the disclosure thing is such a big issue, because what you have with the disclosure thing is you have the possibility of what we call catastrophic disclosure. You see, disclosure has been attempted for a very long time, but it's always been slow. Let's add a little bit of information to the pool here. Let's see if people get, and you could always control it. The attempts that are being done now by the good ETs is what we call catastrophic disclosure, which is sudden disclosure. It's a disclosure that you can't control. And that's what we're expecting. That's what they're trying to pull off in 2024. Catastrophic disclosure. And if you can't control it and the whole ball of wax comes out all at the same time, then we're hoping that the human population will rise up and say, holy mackerel, are you serious? This is what's been going on? We don't want to align ourselves with those guys. We want those guys. And then the good ETs, who we have found have a fanatical adherence to free will, those guys can then intervene. If we sign agreements with the bad ETs, the good ETs will respect those agreements. Hey, if you want to sign forms and be a slave for the rest of eternity, what can we do? And they turn around and go. But they're trying to break down the prison. That means disclosure. We're not trying to tell people what kind of government to form, how to live their lives. All we're saying is tell people the truth. That's all we're saying. And then the disclosure, which is your original question that you asked, becomes obvious. We're just saying, let the disclosure process come to a full conclusion. Let it all come out, and then let people say whatever they want. Let them decide. And if they decide to keep aligning themselves with the reptilians and the bad guys, let them at least know that the reptilians exist, that the bad ETs exist. And then you can decide. And then you can tell us that now what's happening in the solar system right now. The good ETs have flooded this whole solar system with huge resources. Neither side has a technological advantage over the other. They have been around long enough that they've invented everything that can be invented. So neither one has a gun that works better than the other guy's gun. They both have the same type of tech. However, the good ETs by far dominate militarily inside the solar system. The bad ETs by far dominate on Earth because of those agreements that were signed. Now, I know you haven't asked me this, but let me ask it so you. Courtney, can you get a little bit better than remote viewing? Okay. It's so turned out that it's only now possible. It didn't used to be possible. But in December of 2023, no, I'm sorry, December of 2022, a guy came to us called Lincoln Lounsbury. He was the top air traffic controller in the Washington, D.C., that's the Reagan Airport, the Washington, D.C. major international airport. That's the most highly controlled airspace on the planet Earth. On his own ticket, he flew in and he said, "We think you guys should do this." And he came to this very studio that I'm in right now, and he put it up on our monitors. He had a bunch of Excel files. He had PowerPoints, the whole thing. He showed us how to take video recordings of UFOs. Now, the UFOs that he was showing us, he said, they're all using stealth tech. They're trying to hide themselves. You can't see them normally. They typically travel at speeds of 20,000 miles an hour. Now, if you had the Titanic fly over your house, you're not going to see it if it's going 20,000 miles an hour. But he's an air traffic control person, so he was the one who was measuring their speeds, and he was the lead guy in the control towers. And it's not secret anymore. Actually, he has a YouTube channel now. He's just retired recently, and it's Lincoln Lounsbury. That's his YouTube channel. Anyway, but he showed us what cameras to buy. We already use Panasonic Lumix cameras, but he told us, no, we have to get the latest version, Panasonic GH6. Then he told us the company to send the cameras to get them converted to full spectrum. And then he told us the filters that have to go on top of the lenses so that we can dial into the right infrared band. He gave us the whole thing. It wasn't me being a genius. He told us everything, and you can sort of ask questions. That seems very suspicious that he came to you on his ticket and showed us all this information for free. Yeah, it is sort of interesting that it happened. I won't go any further than just say, yeah, it was sort of weird. But we did everything he did. So starting in January of 2023, we went out and we went to a special location. It's called my deck in the back of my house. And we put the tripod there and we pointed the camera up and we said, let's see what happens. We turned it on and recorded for 10 minutes. Another one, we recorded 15 minutes. Then we brought it down and he told us what we had to do with the software. So we did. We put it in to the software and we slowed it way down because we shot at 120 frames a second, 4K wide, shot at wide angle because you can't use the zoom lens. You can't use the zoom on the lens because you can't see them. They're flying too fast. So you have to shoot wide. You have to zoom in post when it's on the computer. So you need to shoot in 4K. And you had to shoot in infrared. And so we did all of that stuff. I put it in the computer. Look, Daz will tell you, I've been studying the ET stuff with remote viewing and everything for a long time. I should be the last person who would be shocked. When I saw on the camera what happened, there was an average of 30 UFOs over my house in every 10, 15-minute block of time. This is in the middle of the day. And you can say, Courtney, well, what do you mean about this? I said, okay, let me share with you one more time, okay? This is the last time. Okay, Instagram. We put these up. Oh, my internet thing is slow.
We can't see your screen yet.
Okay, hold on. Something's like, okay,
well,
it should be
yeah.
Okay, all right, so here is my Instagram page. And what we decided to do is use Instagram because Courtney Brown Farsight, all one word. This is my Instagram page. We decided to use Instagram because everybody has their phone and we wanted to let people see this stuff. Let me show you a picture first. Now, this is not over my house. This is over the Pensacola Naval Air Station down in Pensacola. There you see that ship that's right next to the 4 Blue Angels jets? Okay, now watch. You want to see the video of that? Here it is. Now, those Blue Angel jets are flying at about 500 miles an hour. So that UFO is going about 2,500 miles an hour at least. Do you see it?
Yeah.
Okay. So what we have found out, we found actually in that one time I was taking this recording, we got about 200 or 300 UFOs. They love air shows. Guys, you can chuckle. I don't know why they like air shows. They love air shows. Okay, so here's another one. Take a look at this one. This is right over my house. This is one of the ones that we shot as soon as we turned on the camera. Now watch, guys. You see that cigar-shaped UFO? Now notice it's getting smaller. That means it's going up, and it passes the jet. Now the jet's going 500 or 600 miles an hour. Lincoln Lounsbury tells us it did a number of passes, so we got a whole bunch of recordings of it. Lincoln Lounsbury tells us that that thing is going 20,000 miles an hour. And it was totally invisible light, and it was totally invisible because it was going 20,000 miles an hour. You couldn't see a thing. But here we get it clear as day, a cigar-shaped ship, and because we use 120 frames a second, and going past the aircraft. So, and here's another one here. This is again over the Pensacola Naval Air Station. You see that UFOs shoot across, it'll come back again, and then it goes tunneling between the trees, which is directly over the Pensacola Naval Air Station. Here it'll come again. So here it comes around the corner, and there it is, and it's shooting around, and it's during that time, at least 200 or 300 UFOs I actually caught, none of which were visible. When I was at the Pensacola Naval Air Station, I was totally seeing nothing but Blue Angels jets. When I'm in the back of my house on my deck, I'm totally seeing absolutely nothing except blue sky and Delta aircraft.
How many of these cameras have you prepared now? Have you only got
one? We have 3 cameras, and we actually, when we go out, we typically have 2 or 3 cameras, and we typically have one that's in visible light, and we've never photographed a UFO in visible light. I'm sure they exist, but they're relatively rare. But we have typically one in visible light and one in different bands of infrared. So we have usually the 830 nanometer, and then we often use the 590 nanometer. But typically the 830 is what gives us the best results, and then we have to throw it into that. And we also actually show people how to do this also, how to actually do these recordings. So no matter what kind of UFO picture I show you, you'll always have somebody coming out and saying, it's a smudge, it's a CGI, it's a glitch. So what we're not trying to do is convince you that this is the real McCoy, and what you really have to do is just believe us. So what we're doing is we're telling people how to actually take their own video recordings. You'll get somebody coming out and debunking you if you just say this is the right thing, but they can't debunk you if you took the video and that
for me, to make this less ambiguous, because looking at that, there's something moving across the frame, and we can't say what it is, right, or indeed what altitude it's at, so we can't work out the speed.
By the way,
but if you get
let me say, in addition to using multiple cameras, we have the footage that I've just showed you analyzed on video by Lincoln Lounsbury, the flight air traffic control person, in a whole series that we have up on farsightprime.com. So you can actually see one of the most seasoned air traffic control persons in the most prestigious airport in the entire world, with the most, a super controlled airspace. He's the top guy. You see him actually answering these questions about that kind of stuff. So I'm sorry, David, go ahead.
Well, what I was going to propose is if you record with 2 cameras simultaneously, you can triangulate the location in 3D space of the object. So then you would be able to say, how high is it? How fast is it going? You'd be able to look at it in 3D.
It's actually more complicated than that. We have done that. We do that. That's why we have multiple cameras. That was the original thing. But Lincoln Lounsbury actually knows how to do it better. He knows all the clouds, and he knows the various altitudes of all the clouds, and you can actually see the ships go up into the sky and pass into the cloud. So he tells you the exact altitude from that. He also tells you the exact speed because he has things that are in the frame. Sometimes I crop those things out when I just publish things on Instagram, but he actually has things in the frame like my chimney in my house or a tree or something that act as a marker that he uses.
This is when we're using multiple cameras, right? So this is to calibrate.
And we also do it with multiple cameras. The only issue, and we always have multiple cameras, well, almost always. The only issue is that it became sort of boring for us to keep using multiple cameras forever. We still go out with multiple cameras, but we have found that sometimes the footage is so easily analyzable because you see the things being flying in your physical objects, like they're flying past a jet or they fly into a cloud. So we don't always need all of that. But that was the one thing we tried, multiple cameras. It's more cumbersome. We did it. We've been there. We've done that. But we don't get that much more information from it. But we still go out with multiple
I think
cameras.
Getting a numerical idea of elevation and speed, like to be able to present those things on Google Earth and say, this is the actual flight path, that would be really compelling for me, as opposed to here's a black dot flying across the screen, which could be a bug or
We have done all that, but but Lincoln Lounsbury is the one who actually does the calculations for us because that's his job. In addition, we have he has us using something called Flight Radar 24, and that's an app that you get on your phone, and it tells you every other aircraft that's in the sky at that exact time. So he has us using our phones to get Flight Radar 24 at the same time as everything else is going on. So it's a big job to do all this stuff. But what I'm showing you is
what do you need Flight Radar for, though? Because that's going to show commercial airliners, right, that are going to be going so slowly compared to this phenomenon.
Because you want to be able to identify the exact aircraft that the UFO is flying by, so that you can get the information of where that aircraft was at the exact point in time. You know the aircraft, you know the height,
right?
You know the altitude, you know the direction, and you see the UFO flying right past it. He does all these calculations. He sent us the websites to show us how to do all the calculations, but it's so complicated, I just let him do it. He does it for us. But anyway, you can see him talking about that. He also measures speed in various ways. One is by looking at objects like other aircraft and clouds and things. The other is by measuring in accord of body lengths per second. A body length, you look at the UFO, and then it has a certain body length. Well, that body length will actually, I'm going to cancel out a couple of these web pages. My camera is slowing down. Is it stuttering on your side?
It's stuttering a bit, but we can still hear you great.
Okay, I'm going to try to cut down some windows here. It's a Google thing. This has never happened before, but I'm doing my best to sort of, keep the camera going. The only way I could possibly imagine is to get out and come back in. But anyway, but basically what happens is if you look at body lengths per second, you can actually calculate how many body lengths in 1 second it is moving. Now, Lincoln will tell you that the fastest bug that has ever been recorded in human history, or ancient history, whatever, is 276 body lengths per second. And there's only one bug that can get anywhere close to that. All the others are down like 100 body lengths per second. That's bugs that fly real fast. These UFOs are going close to 1,000 body lengths per second. And he said and those are the slow ones. So there is no physical animal or bug that travels that fast in terms of body lengths per second. You understand? You actually take the length of the bug and you actually measure how many body lengths it moves as it's moving across the screen in a second. And he says that there's no bug that comes close. So there's various ways to estimate speed. There's various ways to estimate speed.
So, are you still with us, Courtney?
I'm with you. Is my video frozen?
It's a little choppy. I mean, don't worry, because you'll have the high quality version will be saved locally. So
I see. Okay. Oh, I see what's going on. It's trying to actually upload.
It uploads in the background, but then
Yeah, it's 10%. That's what's causing the problem. It's uploading at the same time it's recording. So
well, we can still hear you perfectly, so
okay,
I think we'll be okay. When we come off the recording, you just got to wait for it to get to 100, so you just leave the browser open until it finishes, and then it'll do the high quality then. So
the audio is fine. The audio is fine. Go ahead.
Cool. So going way back to Grush and Shed for a minute, I'm kind of suspicious about taking long-term loyal government employees' word for it. You know, you said, Shed was so surprised that people would read the interview or translate it into other languages, and you think a real senior operator in that space would not be surprised that, you know, from that for them to make these statements that it would be widely reported. And my concern is that we're being fed a line by people like Grush that, you know, just because the Pentagon has approved that he can say it doesn't make it true. You know, I don't think we should take what the Pentagon says at face value, because they've obviously got ulterior motives to obfuscate what they're doing, what they're up to, right? So,
well, you know, I personally think that Grush is the last stage of the he said, she said disclosure part. He said, she said is where someone says, trust me, I've been told by a reliable sources, but they themselves...
I've had enough of the he said, she said with the UFO thing, because it's just nothing but that.
It's nothing but that. But Farsight is data-driven. Everything we do is backed up by data. It's data-driven, everything. In terms of video recording UFOs, data-driven. We're not saying believe us. We're saying this is the actual... We actually have a web page on our farsight.org website that tells you exactly the steps to take. What camera to use, what settings to use, what lens to use, what filters to use, what software to use. Farsight is totally data-driven. We don't do any he said, she said stuff. But the entire disclosure movement is all he said, she said stuff, except for that. Now, there's a couple of people that are different from that. Bob Lazar, he was not a he said, she said person. There are a few people in the disclosure movement that actually have real, you know, backgrounds themselves. But in terms of raw data and giving you raw data, Farsight is totally data-driven. So we actually think that that's the next step in the disclosure movement. I want to add something to that, but I'm going to shut up and let you ask a question first.
So RV data, then, again, I think we got to be careful at taking that at face value. I think you did a project recently that was like the death of Jeffrey Epstein, take 2, where you were using new techniques to get around blocking or obfuscation or noise that you were getting in there. So we know that we can have a problem with false data or overlay or blocking or stuff being injected into the signal. What's your state of the art around that, and what steps are you taking to avoid it?
Okay, this is what we found out. We found out that remote viewing data can be blocked and it can be manipulated. So what we found out is that it is possible to completely evade the blocks and to stop any blocking from going on. But we can't do it ourselves. We have to have help. Meaning extraterrestrials who work with us have to have their own ways of getting through all the blocking, technological ways, whatever, and we can go through their consciousness like a carrier wave and get through and see absolutely anything. Nothing can be blocked from us. So this opens up a whole new realm. I was keeping this secret. I kept it secret from Dick and Daz forever. And I kept it secret from all the Farsight people until, I think it was January 2023. We were told that the bad ETs were very concerned about the stuff that Farsight was coming out with, because they knew that catastrophic disclosure could trigger everybody to look at it. Now, our streaming service is run by Vimeo. It can handle 90 to 100 million people simultaneously watching at the same time. It can be upscaled immediately with the blink of an eye, and they were concerned about that, and they were going to actually create some type of a Project Bluebeam or false flag type of thing, where they were going to actually make it public that Farsight was ET controlled, and it was actually trying to control humanity. Now, you can introduce yourself to people only once, and they were going to trigger something that was bad about Farsight and all the stuff that we did. So, and this has happened to us before, as Dad will attest. It happened to us way back in the 1990s with regard to the so-called Hale-Bopp thing, where we were set up in a way that it was designed to sort of cause us tremendous trouble, public dispute. They were going to do that again. So, in January of 2023, we made the decision to come completely clean with our extraterrestrial contacts. So I have videos on that. I've spoken about it openly in interviews. I'm not hiding it anymore. I kept it from Daz and Dick in the beginning, but basically, we have had extraterrestrial contact from the beginning, since I was a kid. When I was a kid, for example, when I went to sleep, there were 2 gray guys on my right and 2 gray guys on my left at night when I slept. Now, this is not something I woke up with and dreamt up with hypnosis or hypnotic regression or whatever. They were just there. There were 2 on my left and 2 on my right. They didn't frighten me. They were like bodyguards. They just stood there. And there was, for years, they were just there. And I was going to tell my mother about it, but I said, what the heck? They seem friendly, so I just let it be. There was a whole bunch of other contact, a whole bunch of stuff like that, similar afterwards. Whenever I needed to do something, I was sort of told what to do. I was told when to actually start the remote viewing training. I was told the person to actually go to connect it. This is unambiguous stuff. I have actually been on ships. I have a daughter on a ship. I visit her. I have sat at the control panels. These are not things I drag up through dream, hypnosis. This is just stuff that has happened. Our remote viewing procedures, we started off in the early days with a version of CRV, which we didn't like. We evolved them totally away from that. I tried to do it myself, and I was totally incompetent. I couldn't do it. They told us what to do. It was like a graduate student with a professor. They said, no, do this, do that. So our procedures were completely rewritten. I'm not the genius that thought of everything. They told us what to do. We have so many procedures that are different from everything else. They're not stuff that we did. So as of January 23, I've been fessing up. I've been confessing to absolutely everybody. We have had physical beings that we're side by side with. I'm not talking about I'm talking about ones you can actually see. So this has happened to us. We have actually started a series called Conversations with Harvey, where we actually video record and they're invisible. Now, those are done in a secret location at the beach. Well, sometimes we've been using the beach so far. Next to an Air Force base, next to a Navy a base. Navy's been very helpful to us, to be quite honest. They're very protective and they've been helpful. They rescued us sometimes in ways, I don't want to go into it, but they basically rescued some of us from really serious problems. And that means they were tracking us. They found it. They knew it. They pulled us. I personally am indebted to the U.S. Navy. Otherwise, my family wouldn't exist the way it is. I mean, it's like you have no idea what's gone behind the scenes. So we feel very comfortable near that naval air base. Anyway, the ETs, they actually show up. Because I've been doing this for so long, I'm so used to them, I can see them clear as day. It's like when Jazz is remote viewing. He can see these things in his mind's eye, but it's like he still sees them, but they're not coming in through his eyes. Well, that's like me with the ETs. I can see them clear as day, but I'm not in a trance or anything. They're just there. And they come down and they're invisible. And they have tech that makes themselves invisible. Now, Dick Algeier actually asked me the other day, he said, Courtney, are you telling me that you actually go down and have recordings of yourself talking to invisible aliens? And I said, yes. Well, yeah, but I said, Dick, you've done this yourself. Whenever you do a remote viewing session, you have telepathic communications with those aliens. Look at the Phoenix Lights projects that you and Daz did. You communicated with those aliens all over the place. And you were not physically, you're not visible to them. Well, we finally answered the question of why they have to be invisible. because of the new projects we came out. This answers sort of Joshua's question that I said, go watch our UFO crashes. If they become visible even for a split second, they get shot down. They get captured and shot down. When they come down to visit, they are nervous as hell. They're slumming it when they come down. They're frightened. It's not easy for them to come down. So when they come down and we have these meetings, honestly, there is hundreds of security personnel. Everybody is armed to their teeth. They're doing this as a special thing, and they want us to video record things because we had so many questions that we had all these projects, but we needed the glue to stitch everything together. So what basically happened was, as far as myself and my son are concerned, we're born here on Earth as normal humans in a human body with normal human parents. We went to the human educational setting. We went through university ourselves. We lived the entire human experience as it is. But we didn't just come from here originally. All of you, everybody, you're all ISBs that came from someplace else. But we were not processed by what we call death traps, the amnesia machines. So we were able to remember where we came from. We came here with the original intent to create Farsight. And that's been the project from the very beginning. We had to come up with a library that would satisfy all of the informational needs of what's happened to humanity since the beginning. And that library didn't exist because everything that people have been told since the beginning is all controlled, and it's all false. It's all wrong. And we had to actually show that library, and it had to be data-driven. It could not be he said, she said stuff. It had to all be raw data collected under blind conditions, and we had to learn it all from the beginning. We couldn't just land on a ship and actually just start doing things. We had to actually come in as prisoners, as humans, learn everything from a human perspective, to be human, totally human, to be born as human, to be educated as human, and to discover everything all by ourselves. That was the whole project. We couldn't come in from the outside. We had to rediscover everything. And that's what we have done. And in the process, there's been a lot of contact. And I have to say, I cannot take credit for the amazing procedures that we use for remote viewing. I swear, guys, I didn't come up with those things. They said, do this way. And so we did it that way. So with regard to the blocking stuff, the reason we're not blocked, and Daz and Dick didn't know this when they were doing the Great Pyramid of Giza. I have some phrases on the top of the target that I clip out later, but I have us going through the consciousness of somebody and the good ETs in order to get to the target. Otherwise, Daz or Dick would not have gotten to the Great Pyramid of Giza stuff either. So that's part of the target that they were never sort of told about. But when I don't use that, we get blocked all the time. Remember, there's free will.
Risk here that we still have a he said, she said situation, because now the veracity of all of the remote viewing that uses this approach to get around blocking rests on whether we can trust the entities which are psychically middle people in this. How do we know that we can trust them?
Well, we try to back up. By the way, first of all, David, your question is a great question. And I wish more people would be skeptical. I know you're from Britain, but in the United States, people that ask questions like that are from Missouri. That's called the show me state. It's on their bumper sticker for their cars. It says, show me. It's a show me state. I wish everybody in the world was just asking questions like that. How do you do that? So what we have tried to do is we tried to be totally data-driven. Everything. And we tried to show the procedures. So all of the remote viewing procedures that we use, well, not all, but most of the remote viewing procedures we use, we have videos explaining it, how to do it. When the video recordings, we don't just say, believe our stuff. In fact, at the end of almost every one of our videos, I say at the end, I'm not asking you to believe me. I'm not asking you to follow me. I'm just stating the conclusions that we're drawing from the accumulated body of work. And we show you how to do it yourself. You don't know about the ETs? Okay, just get a camera. We show you how to set it up and analyze it. Do it yourself, and you can see the ships yourself. The better the camera you use, and Lincoln Loudsbury is showing people how to do it with these cell phones, so you can actually do it with a cell phone. You can't get as good an image as what we get with our good cameras, but it works. And what he uses to block out the ultraviolet, he's very clever. He came in with absolutely everything, including how to do this on the cheap. You know those 3D glasses that you get at the movie theater that have a red and a blue? Well, if you take the two lenses, the two things, and you clip them together, staple them together, and you glue it, or don't glue it, you tape it to the back of your cell phone. What it does, infrared gets through, and the camera on the cell phone goes bonkers trying to get any light at all. So it ramps up the automatic gain control for the sensor of the camera, and you actually get to see some of these ships. Unfortunately, you can only shoot at 59 frames a second, and the camera resolution isn't as good as what we get with Panasonic Lumix GH6s, but it works. And on his YouTube channel, he's showing people how to do that with cell phones. And so it's data-driven. Everything is data-driven. And with regard to the how do you know that, one of the things that we are trying to do is to never, ever lie. That we always tell, no matter what happens to us, we always tell exactly what we do. And we say, don't believe us. This is the procedures we used. This is what we did, and these are the things. And when you can ask Daz, he's right here. When he did the Great Pyramid of Giza, or any of the projects that he did on Farsight, he recorded everything totally blind on video, meaning you saw it, original video of him actually doing the original stuff.
Oh yeah, sure. I mean, I'm not questioning the way remote viewing works, but if the target is what some unknown entity without established trust says telepathically and not the actual thing that it's supposed to be, my question is about how do we trust that middleman, not does the remote viewing work? I mean, we know remote viewing works and can be interfered with.
Yeah.
If we've got somebody in between, how do we establish the trust there?
It's a good question. Part of that answer is through long experience with these beings. The longer you have exposure to these beings, the more you can see that they're telling you the truth. It's like any friend. If you have a friend and they've been helping you throughout, you know that you can trust them. I had a situation where I had a girlfriend who I really thought was amazing. She was great, but the issue of trust comes in, and if the issue of trust comes in, a relationship just can't go forward. So the answer to your question is not something I can just give you a logical answer for. You have to interact with these people for a long period of time. The only thing I am telling you is the stuff that you're getting coming out of the bad ETs is totally corrupted. They don't want you to see any of this stuff that they're doing, and for good reason. Now, all of the ships, or almost all, basically all of the ships that we're recording with our videos of these things, they're all the bad ETs. If they were the good ETs, they would be shot down. So the video recordings that we're giving you and showing you how to do, it's like, the traffic on the streets outside of a Big Ben in London, it's like cars all over the place. That's what it's like right above your head. They're all using stealth tech. And I'm not saying believe me. Get your camera out, set it up, shoot them yourself. You'll see them. They're all using stealth tech. So obviously they're trying to hide themselves. Point number one. Okay, my whole thing. Okay, now I'm back. Okay, so the issue is those ETs are bad, and they're obviously trying to hide themselves because the only way you can video record their ships, which are above your house right now, is using ways to evade their stealth tech. If they were good ETs, they wouldn't be trying to hide themselves. So there's an issue of logic, there's also an issue of long experience, and there's also an issue of saying your question is valid. Why don't you just experience these people? Once we get catastrophic disclosure, the good ETs have the military resources to resolve this. But they will not do it unless there's a free will decision by large sectors of humanity saying they want it. If they came in and tried to militarily knock out the bad ETs, what would happen if Americans said, we think Russian population is being controlled by totalitarian forces. We're going to free them. We're going to invade Russia and free them. As soon as we flew over to Moscow, the whole Russian population would say, help, free us. This is terrible. Free us from the Americans. Defend us. So they would demand that their government would defend them against the Americans. What if we decided to do the same to the Chinese? Let's invade China and free the Chinese people so that they have open internet and they can see the truth. As soon as we step 1 foot on Chinese soil, the entire China population will say, government, help us, the Americans are invading. So we would end up having to fight the population as well as the government. The good ETs are in that situation. If they simply invade, they'd end up fighting humans, as well as the bad ETs. It's a total loss. They wouldn't be able to do anything. So they have to get humanity to wake up. That's why this total disclosure thing is so important. Now, they have been working behind the scenes really effectively. They are the ones that are responsible for movies like Star Wars, Star Trek, the Matrix movies, all the science fiction, Halo. What they do is they've been planting ideas in the heads of scriptwriters when they're asleep. And then when the scriptwriter, when she or he wakes up, they say, I've got this great idea for a new show. And they end up, writing the new show or the new movie. Now, these are free will ETs, so they're not going to force the scriptwriter to do anything. But if they plant the idea and the scriptwriter, by her or his own decision, makes a movie out of it, hey, so that's where all these movies have been coming from. That's where all this stuff that the bad ETs definitely don't want people thinking about. But the whole planet has really been accustomed now to the idea of galactic war, interstellar war, confrontation between species. That's sort of normal to us now. We understand those types of concepts. And this is where we are right now. So the answer to your question, David, is a long question, a long answer, because it requires, like any friendship, it requires time. It requires exposure. It's not a logical thing. It's not something I can say, trust those people. You have to have the time, but I can definitely tell you, you cannot try the other side. And if you want proof of that, they're trying to hide themselves. The ships are clearly flying around with stealth tech, and I can prove that to you with your own camera. So I can prove the negative. If you want to know that the good guys are the good guys, that'll take a little bit more time.
Yeah, I mean, we're all aware of the trickster entity, the misleading things which kind of lurk out there in psychic space. So it's like, how do we differentiate those things which will spin a really good yarn and tell a good story, and sometimes tell the truth? How do we differentiate that from the good guys? Because it doesn't have to be like really evil to be not always accurate, right? Welcome to another surprise intermission, which I promise is not an ad. Due to technical issues with our recording, we unfortunately lost about an hour of our discussion with Courtney. Podcastle told us it had the whole recording, but when we went to edit it, we were missing a huge chunk. I don't know what happened, but our sincere apologies to Courtney and to our listeners. We talked about a whole load of different stuff in that hour, which means there's now absolutely no context for the following ridiculous jump cut. Okay, we're back.
So we have to be a little careful with the use of the word Jedi, because that's a copyrighted term by Star Wars, so you can't use the term Jedi Temple or anything like that. But it conveys the idea that we're trying to get a lot of people, especially young people, who get really excited by this stuff, and then they can look at the work of Daz and Dick and others, everybody at Farsight, and they can say, okay, this is a human thing, we can do this. And so it's not like these weird ETs do these crazy things. Everybody can do it, and that there must be a reason why they can't do it, so that we're going to overcome that. And older people, and the mass of older people, are going to be more resistant to it than the younger people. So the younger people will look at Daz and basically, it's sort of a hero worship type of thing, like looking at Obi-Wan Kenobi. They'll believe that they can do it. Whereas older people will look at Daz and sort of say, it's cool that you can do these tricks, but, how will that scale out to? But the younger people won't have those problems. So we're planning on setting up situations in Asia, as well as Africa, as well as the United States, and eventually we'll span into Latin America, I guess. There are some people in the CRV community that are already fluent in Spanish, so they might handle things like that. But yeah, so that's sort of on the horizon for things that but all that has to wait until the resources are there to do it, and that happens as soon as literally the day after the trigger event happens that triggers rapid or catastrophic disclosure. Yeah, in fact, the conversation that Des and I have to have with regard to security will happen like the day after the trigger. It's not going to be like 6 months later. It'll be quite obvious that everything is going to... That's what the whole idea of catastrophic disclosure is. It means sudden, rapid, all at once, and it cannot be controlled. So setting up the stuff that has to be disclosed, which is both stuff coming out of the government as well as Farsight stuff, that has to be done in advance, especially the Farsight stuff with the streaming service and everything. But then afterwards, it'll be a huge race to get everything. So you're going to have such a mad rush of young people. That's the thing. It's not going to be... Older people are going to be interested, but in terms of people who are going to bite into it and get ferociously interested in doing it, that'll happen like the day after disclosure happens. And that's when the issues of security are going to become a big paramount again. I mean, it's a really interesting situation we have now. You have a situation where, as of right now, you can't even mention the word remote viewing on a TED Talk, for example. The TED Talks, you can't even get close. And mainstream media isn't doing anything. And if you want sort of proof that Farsight's doing something, go to Google and search for remote viewing. Until June of 2022, Farsight was always at the top. I mean, in the top 5, you search for remote viewing, you always found Farsight. And together also you got the IRVA and things like that would be there. Now you do a search for remote viewing, not for Farsight, but for remote viewing. You can't find us. You do the same thing with YouTube. You search for remote viewing, we were always at the top. But what happened was June of 2022 is when Congress mandated that the military start sending information about the UFOs that's when the disclosure thing started. That was the month that the shadow banning happened. So by that time, we had already started up our farsightprime.com, but we've been building it, knowing that the shadow banning really wouldn't have any effect on us once the disclosure thing happens. We're already still very large, relatively speaking. I mean, we can't compete with PewDiePie or Michelle Pham or people like that on YouTube, but we have 80,000 subscribers on YouTube, which is not shabby. It's not bad, but it's not like millions and tens of millions, 100 million. But and it's very hard for people sometimes to find us now, but we're still big enough that the word of mouth goes. And then they always email us in, or they very often email us in about how annoyed they are that they had trouble finding us. Now, if you search for the word Farsight, we're there. So they're not banning us. It's shadow banning, but it affects Google as well as YouTube. And now, for a few months after June of 2022, it didn't affect the other search engines. So you could still find us on Yahoo, and things like that. So, but now it's affected all the other search engines. So it's slowly, as the months went on, it affected. So, but you do get a ton of other sites dealing with remote viewing, all of which spin your wheels. There's nothing to bite into. So people will get to it and try to get information about it, become frustrated, and then spin their wheels and then go. You don't get any actual projects. You don't get any stuff you can actually learn stuff from. So that's where we are with this. And when catastrophic disclosure happens, all that, I'm assuming the shadow banning will be gone at that point because YouTube and Google would be humiliated that you can't find us. Now, we're the largest venue dealing with remote viewing. We have audio. We have audio and video. A huge number of video and audio recordings on how to do remote viewing. So we have like tons of stuff, how to do the meditation. We always precede our remote viewing with meditation. So we have videos on that and has the procedures for remote viewing. It goes on and on. We're not talking 2 or 3 videos. We're talking like 30 videos on just on the process alone. And we used to have those all up on YouTube until the shadow banning became impossible to find us. So we just put them all over on farsightprime.com. So if people are learning our methods, we figured they might as well be subscribers. But anyway, so that's sort of proof that we're making. I don't know if anybody else has been shadow banned, so that sort of is a proof that we're making an impact, because we're the only one.
All my, you know, because I got a big remote viewing site. I used to be on page 1 of Google for every remote viewing search term. Can't find me. I'm on like page 50 now of Google.
Actually, I did a search for you, Daz, and I found that same result. Yeah, I remember now. I found your stuff disappeared as well.
Yeah, completely gone. Yeah.
So that's an indication. You only get shadow banned if you're doing something.
Yeah, I've just tried it, and the number one quote, the helpful context that it adds, is from Tim Riffett, who I don't think anybody should get any remote viewing from. Wow.
So are you doing a search now for remote viewing on what, Google?
Yeah. I've on Google. I went through pages and pages, and I can't find you or Daz.
No. And as I said, for years, because I worked on my site seriously, every search term you put in, you know, like remote viewing training, remote viewing targets, remote viewing practice, I was always on page 1 of Google for every search term. Yeah. And then 2 or 3 years ago, it stopped, and then you just can't find anything serious. And as Courtney said, the same on YouTube as well. It's hard to find any of my remote viewing content on YouTube.
Now let me go to DuckDuckGo. That was the last one to still have us. Let me see if they've done anything. So I'm doing DuckDuckGo. They got Columbia University, CIA. Looks like it's hit DuckDuckGo.
Farsight.
What are you?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You're the 6th one down on DuckDuckGo. I guess you find showing different results. Yeah.
Wait a second. Let me see. Do you find it? I haven't found us yet.
Oh, you're on the first page for me.
For DuckDuckGo? Where? You said number 6?
Yeah, I got Wikipedia, Gaia, psychicsfortoday.com, Gaia again, Reddit, and the Reddit Beginner's Guide.
Oh, wait a second. No, I'm still on Google. Let me go to Google. Yeah, now I'm on DuckDuckGo. Okay,
it is bad though, isn't it? The general state of search results. I was find anything.
I was searching on Google again. Now I'm on DuckDuckGo.
I think it's not just.
There we are. Yeah, there we are. There's a Farsight Institute. We're near the top, and I bet we'd find Daz in here too. Yeah, they have Gaia. They have a few links for Gaia. Then they have IRVA, and they have Farsight. And I bet if I got
viewed, you're on page 2, Daz.
Okay, but at least it's not page 100. Yeah, they have our learning center as well on page 2. Daz, you're there. Okay, so it's not. So DuckDuckGo is the last of the search engines that don't do the shadow ban.
I may be wrong on this, so don't quote me on this, but I believe DuckDuckGo actually uses Bing search. So let's try Bing.
All right, let me try Bing.
Let's see what I got. Oh my God, there's so much stuff on this page. Good gracious. What am I even
I'm on Bing now, so...
No, this looks like a mixture of...
I'm on Chrome, so I'm doing this without using the internet.
Page 2. Here you are, your page 2. It's a different set of results that I got on DuckDuckGo. I guess maybe the...
Oh yeah, I found Farsight on Bing.
Mm-hmm. That's on page 2. So, that's good. Oh, and
yeah, I found even it found me.
You're on here twice, yeah.
I'm at CourtneyBrown.com. Is that okay? Great. So, I guess I'm supposed to be a Microsoft fan now. Is it?
Yeah. I think the takeaway from this is just don't use Google search. because it's useless for finding anything these days, isn't it? Not just remote viewing. It's become terrible, possibly due to the incentives to drive people towards websites that are going to generate ad spend and advertising revenue. So they're not incentivized to direct you off to a small website with good information. They don't make any money off it.
I think we can add all the links to Courtney's sites and all that kind of stuff to the description. And for me, I just want to say thanks for spending the 2.5 hours or more now go for this, and for some stuff that I never knew about you as well, Courtney. With your experience or past and stuff. So that's quite enlightening. I like that.
Yeah, I sort of apologize for not telling you in the past, but there was a credibility, and it was very hard for keeping you and Dick going with Farsight. You guys were always threatening to quit because of the esoteric content that would be blending in. I was trying to blend it in with sort of real Earth targets like JFK assassination, 9/11, stuff like that. But you guys were always sort of, your geniuses are temperamental. If you look at it's not just prima donnas, but geniuses. Mozart was temperamental. Beethoven were temperamental. The geniuses they have a very active intellect, and I was dealing with two of the most brilliant people on the planet Earth with respect to remote viewing, Dick and Daz, and keeping them sort of going as long as they went with Farsight projects. And they did a ton of Farsight projects. That was a Herculean task to keep that going. But it worked out really well, and there's a ton of projects, and those projects will be so baseline necessary in the near future. And I don't think it's going to be 10 years from now. I think it's going to be like real soon that it'll all come back as being, so that's why we did it all. I mean, it'll have a huge impact. I'm so glad that Dick and Daz went through that, because at that time there wasn't anybody that could do it.
No, yeah.
There weren't anybody that could do that type of remote viewing. There wasn't. I mean, you can't name names of people who were talented enough to do those projects back in those days.
No one was doing anything. You were the first to set up, and you were the first to pay remote viewers to work like that. If it wasn't for doing that with you, me and Dick wouldn't have gone on over these last 8 years or so to make remote viewing a full-time business for ourselves and to support our families.
Yeah, it needed to be done. And anyway, but you're still doing it, and you're still. But I think the time of people separating out and doing their own individual thing is going to turn around. And I think one of the things you're going to see in Farsight is and people are going to be brought back, and we're going to have to. But in a different auspice, in the sense of leadership, and in the sense of Obi-Wan Kenobi type of inspiration to young people. So it's not like Daz is going to have to, do amazing remote viewing that will turn the head on his tail. He's already done that. He doesn't have to turn the head on the world on its head again. It's already done that. But what he's going to have to do is to talk to the younglings, the young people that are going to be riveted to him. Like I can see it in my head. They're going to be looking at his face, because they know they can't get that information from any of the older people on the whole planet. No professors, no high school teachers, no college professors, no parents. Nobody can give them that information, but they're going to know it's real. And they're going to look at him like, it's going to be that, and that's also when we have to deal with security also, when that happens. But the role that Daz is going to play at that time period, it's not that I'm going to think about it and I'm going to make the decisions. At that point, I have to talk with Daz, and I have to say, how are we going to handle this? The young people from all different ages are going to be, how are we going to deal with that? So I have to ask questions like, what do you think you're comfortable with, Daz? how can we deal with this? What kind of arrangements can we do that you're comfortable with?
Mhm.
Do you want to do it all in Britain? Can you help design? We can't use the word Jedi Temple, but can you help design it? What would be an appropriate place? We were hoping maybe the Georgia mountains. But, like, what would be an appropriate place? What would be the setting? And it's not all just intellect, logic. It's got to have a feel to it. So maybe you could actually help fly out here. And of course, we'd cover everything expenses wise, and sort of help us sort of figuring out where it would be, what feels like the right place. And it can't be just one. And Star Wars, I'm convinced that Star Wars had many things that were sort of dropped into people's minds to get this thing. They had Jedi temples all over the place.
Yes.
They didn't just have one. So we have to think about how should it be done in Africa? How should it be done in Asia? And it's not just me making these decisions. We have to think about it together and come to conclusions. And maybe we'll try different things. But who's going to decide those things if it's not people like Daz thinking these things through? And it definitely cannot be me making authoritarian. This is something that has to be for humanity. So humanity is going to have people involved. And so it will not be an issue of money. It'll be an issue of feeling, intuitions, sensing. But it's coming. It's a very exciting time, Daz. David and Joshua, you're going to be right there. It
would be interesting to see remote viewing and these kind of abilities spread in that way. So I think we would all look forward to seeing that.
Yeah. Well, let's hope remote viewing's the next big thing. So let's wrap it up, I think. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Courtney.
The only thing I can add is everybody does, especially eat well, exercise, stay healthy. The show isn't over yet. Phase one of the show is wrapping up.
Mm-hmm.
Phase two, where you deal with, what do you deal? Just think of it. Just think. Imagine rapid disclosure happening, catastrophic disclosure happening. So that's going to happen. But when it happens, what do you do with not 10 young people interested? What do you do with a couple billion young people who are frantically interested, and you're one of only a few people that have done this? Do you get an idea of what it's going to be like? It's not good, and they know they can't get it from anywhere else. You're talking a level of yearning that we've never seen on this planet before. And you're like right there. So it's definitely cannot be a situation where I design it and say, come on, Dad, I want you to do X, Y, Z. That is like, that's totally out. It can't work. It's got to be like the meeting. I don't like to use Star Wars analogy, but those words, the meeting of the Jedi has to take place. How are we going to do this? And actually, the Jedi had a problem. They became a mercenary force for the secular republic. They lost the vision. And the Sith in Star Wars actually had the vision, but they said in order for us to have this vision come true, they had to basically enslave the rest of humanity to force everybody, to force the rest of the galaxy to create their vision.
Yep.
So we're in a situation, we can't make the mistake of the Jedi of becoming a secular mercenary force. That's what essentially the remote viewers that were working for the military did. They became a mercenary force for the government. We have to actually say, we can't make that mistake. But on the other hand, we don't want to go the route of the Sith either, of trying to force everything. So that creation of a new humanity has never been done before. The only thing, we can wrap this up with this. The only thing I want to add is, apparently from what I've been told, this is he said, she said, but in the discussions with the ETs that I've talked to, apparently it's never happened before, just exactly like it's happening here. And it seems to be that the entire galaxy is watching Earth right now. So it's not just like we have so many YouTube subscribers. It's a real drama, and the whole galaxy that's gone through a holocaust of wars, disruption and everything. They're looking at what's left over here, and they know if we fail, the reptilians and everything, they're going to blast out of here, and a second Holocaust that's worse than the first one could happen. So this is like really, and it's never been done exactly the way it's being done here. So it's not just a couple billion young people going to be looking at us. You got a whole galaxy looking and saying, what the heck is going to happen next? So the level of the audience, the level of the drama, and the level of the potential, I don't even know if I can even conceive of what's going to happen. But this catastrophic disclosure thing, when it happens, we're seeing the tip of the iceberg. That's how I see it. I could be totally wrong, but this is how I see it.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah.
Wow, we live in interesting times.
Yeah, interesting times.
Indeed. Well, thank you so much, Courtney, for joining us today, because this has been nearly 3 hours now, I think, hasn't it? I mean, what a monster chat. We're going to have to put this out as a two-parter.
Maybe break it up.
Yeah. It's just too long for everybody.
I just hope you get the full recording.
Any closing remarks? I think we've run out of closing remarks now.
Yeah, just thanks from me. Thanks for everyone. It's been a really interesting 3-hour chat.
Yeah, it's been wild.
And fun to meet you.
Say goodnight on behalf of Josh, because I think he can't speak at this point.
Thank you for your contribution to the field. There's a lot of people who join our community that they haven't heard of remote viewing until they've seen some of your stuff. So thank you.
That's true, yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Right. Well, goodbye and thank you.
Okay, so
messages. I don't believe our souls penetrate sucking aliens. Have you ever felt like the retrievals, right? Have you ever had an extra-terrestrial just right up your ass with John Carter? There's something that's not started to